going on, guys? Welcome back to the Good Success Podcast. I am your host, Josh Culler, and today we've got a special episode for you guys. We have got Carole Ellis on the line today. Carole, what's going on?
A lot. I'm so happy to be here.
That's good. You look happy to be here. That big smile, like you're ready to go, aren't you? So this is not going to be your typical like real estate investor. Carole has been around real estate investors for the longest time, and we're going to let her get into that and kind of talk about it. But her experience in just like anything that has to do with people is just absolutely crazy. And I'm excited to do this interview with her. And we got some really good questions for her. So she's going to be able to talk a lot about investors. And then she actually is the editor-in-chief for Think Realty, which you guys, we talk about Think Realty a lot. And if you, ever see her around, make sure you go, say hi to her, say, I saw you on the Good Success Podcast, and make sure, shake her hand and meet her and everything. She's a sweetheart. She's very easy to talk to. So again, this is going to be an exciting episode. So make sure you guys stay tuned. If you are Facebook Live with us right now, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're coming by way of knowing Carole, because she shared this, and you don't know us, then welcome to Good Success. This is the Good Success Podcast. We're on episode, I believe this is 107 or 108, something like that. So we're way up there right now. So make sure you guys subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Kevin is going to be on the link. So anything that we talk about with, contact information for Carole and websites and stuff like that. And then we're going to be talking about some of our events that are coming up. That all is going to be linked below for you guys. So make sure you check out the links. Leave comments, like this, and then make sure you're sharing it around. So thank you guys for joining us on Facebook Live today. If you are not joining us on Facebook Live, but you are listening to this on podcast or you're watching this later after it's been posted, we do go Facebook Live every single Friday at 12 noon Central Standard Time. So tune in. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple of things that we got coming up for Good Success. So the next thing that is coming up is the Community Go-Giver event happening July 25, 26, and 27. Carole, I'm not sure if you're going to be there, but you are helping us a lot with some things that are in the works for the actual Flipping Gary vision that Tom has. And guys, we apologize for not having Tom on. He had some things come up today that he could not be a part of this, but he is working very hard on this Flipping Gary vision that this Community Go-Giver event is all about. It's all about, going and fix and flipping your communities and actually making an impact on them. And Carole has been extremely, extremely helpful with some information, some key information that we've been able to use to actually start making things happen in Gary and see things happen in Gary. So we're very excited about that. It's happening at our office. It is in Gary, Indiana. So make sure you guys check it out. We are selling out at 80 seats, but there's not 80 seats available. So it's going to sell out very soon. It's next month. It's coming up super quick. I can't believe how fast it's come up. And you guys make sure you check it out. CommunityGoGiver.com. Again, Kevin's going to have it linked below. You guys go purchase your tickets because they're going to go up soon, if not sell out soon. So make sure you check it out and go to CommunityGoGiver.com now. And then next is the Good Success Mastermind. The next event is in August 9, 10, and 11. And that's actually happening in our back door as well. So it's going to be at Innsbrook, which is a country club in Maryville, Indiana. It's right about 5 minutes down the road from our office. So if you guys wanted to hang out later on, then I'm sure that we're more than open to doing that. But we're excited about that. The mastermind is growing huge. It's absolutely exploding. We're super excited about it. We've got an amazing group of guys that are together. And I know that Eddie Wilson, president or CEO now of Think Realty, is actually a part of that. And so Carole knows him very well, and she knows a good chunk of the people that are actually in our group. So you guys check it out, goodsuccess.com/mastermind. You do have to fill out an application there. We don't let anybody in there. We actually do vet the volume that you're doing, but also your character. If you're a giver, if you're a taker, we've had people come in the room that are like that, and they just don't come back because they don't feel comfortable in the room, because that's not the actual culture that we've created in there. So you guys go fill out the application, and then we'll chat with you after you have done that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Carole, I am done talking. So do me a favor. Well, first of all, I'm going to introduce how kind of we know each other and how you know Good Success. So like I said, guys, we are partners with Think Realty, and Carole is the editor-in-chief. That's the correct title, right? Editor-in-chief of Think Realty?
Think Realty Magazine. Yes.
The Think Realty Magazine. Okay, right. So if you guys haven't checked out the magazine, I believe it's at every Barnes & Nobles, and you can also probably place the order online. And then if you haven't gone to the Think Realty events, make sure you go, because you guys will not only see us there, but you'll see Carole there now. So you guys make sure you go up and say hi to them. The next event's in July 14 and 15, I believe, and that's in Irvine, California. And I will be there. And then Jared Stokemeister, you guys have seen him around. He'll be there as well. So you guys check it out. If you are in the California region, or if you want to fly in there and just have some fun, go check it out, thinkrealty.com. But Carole, let's go ahead and give yourself an introduction. I know that you do the editing for the Think Realty magazine, but you're also doing a couple other things with self-directed.org and that kind of stuff. A little more about that, because that's actually a side of you that I've not been able to hear about at all. You know, I went to the website and everything. So, tell me a little bit about that. Give a brief introduction of who you are and your background, what you do, and how long you've been doing all that.
All right. Well, the short version is I'm editor-in-chief of Think Realty Magazine, and I'm also a co-founder of Self-Directed Investor Society, which is SDI Society. Think Realty Magazine is the premier and one of the only monthly print publications for real estate investors that you can find on the newsstand. Of course, we're also online. And Self-Directed Investor Society, we're based out of selfdirected.org. That's a home base of our home base, and we're a membership association for self-directed investors, which means people who are interested in using alternative assets, which is to say not just stocks and bonds and mutual funds, to support their retirement. And we're not custodians. A lot of people think we're custodians. We are not financial advisors. We're actually advocates for the investor. We're in a very unique position because we are not any of those other things, which means we are uniquely positioned to tell you precisely what you need to know in order to make good decisions about custodians and financial investments and things like that.
Yeah.
And does that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we are partners with Think Realty. So I'm going to ask most of these questions are going to be geared towards more Think Realty, because we are wanting to, we're partners with them. So we're wanting to push them out a little bit more. And Carole's heavily involved with them. So briefly kind of tell us like what editor-in-chief of the magazine actually means. Like, what do you do when you're with Think Realty and actually like helping them out? Because I've seen you at the events. If you guys see Carole, she'll go around with, I think it's your phone, and you record and interview people, and that's pretty cool the way she does it. And so if you guys have seen the articles that are out on Think Realty, they're amazing. So give us a little bit of an overview of what you actually do for the Think Realty magazine.
Yes. So editor-in-chief traditionally implies that that individual has editorial control in terms of policy and content of a print publication. But with Think Realty and with real estate investing in particular, it means a whole lot more than that, because there is such a digital component that wasn't historically, of course, part of print media. So at Think Realty, I am the editor-in-chief of their magazine. That means that I work with them to create all of the content that goes into the magazine. Doesn't mean I write all of it, but I handle that content creation. I do write a fair amount of it. I also do attend industry events. I'm fortunate in that I get to go to almost all the Think Realty events, which makes me really happy. I get to do a lot of market analysis, and we provide daily news content, and that's almost always through me as well. So
Gotcha.
we're really, I would say my job is really identifying really valuable, actionable trends and strategies, and then conveying them to our readership or our audience in a way that they can then implement a change, implement a strategy, or somehow access that information and then make better decisions.
Gotcha. So I have a question about that, and then I got another question to follow up with it. So how do you kind of like discover these types of topics that you guys talk about? Because a lot of the stuff that Think Realty puts out, I get your guys' newsletters and everything. They're fantastic articles. They're really informative. They're very up to date to what's actually going on in the industry. So how do you guys sniff out the actual trends and everything that's going on in the real estate investing world?
Well, that's my job.
Or is that confidential?
I read a lot of news every day, and I read a lot of reports. That's the main thing that I do. I talk to everybody everywhere I go. about what they're doing, what's working for them, what they're seeing. We've been in the same room before. Like, I will interview you, and if you aren't careful, I'll interview you right now. To find out what you're
hijack this right now.
and how flipping Gary is going and all that. And I have 10,000 questions about why that's working, what you want to do differently, what you think about different things. And, you just you have to figure out a way to find out as close to all of it as you can, and then figure out what part of all of it matters.
Right. So then you actually like piece everything together to create a piece of content that will actually be published in the magazine or on one of the blogs or something like that. Is that kind of accurate to say?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So how did you get into this? How did you actually like get into the entire thing of editor-in-chief? Because it's some serious skill. Like, I'm telling you, even just the interviews that I do on these podcasts, it's taken me a while to actually get used to it and make sure I'm asking the right questions, making sure I'm listening to the conversation and not just waiting for my turn to talk, and actually like facilitate questions that I'm asking. I give a structure of questions that I send out to the interviewee before we actually go live, but then I'm asking questions throughout the entire thing. So how did you get into this, and how did that like kind of become what you do for life pretty much?
Okay. Well, when I was in college, don't worry, that was a long time ago, but it's not a really long story. My background is English literature and plant biology, and I worked for the University of Georgia Research Magazine, and I served as their interim editor when their editor-in-chief and their assistant editor left, and that was right out of college. I also worked in a mycology lab around the same time, and when they brought in the new editor-in-chief, that was around the time that the housing market crashed. And so Brian and I were doing a lot of educating about how to wholesale houses, things like that. That was also about the time that the real estate information boom, for lack of a better term, really took off. And so I was creating a lot of content for investors who were trying to teach people how to do what they were doing for various reasons. These weren't people who were failing. These were people who were thriving during the housing crash. So I went from the UJ Research Magazine to the Brian Ellis Investing Letter, and Brian Ellis is my husband, and provided their daily news and content. I managed their JVs, and over the course of many years, I eventually met Eddie Wilson and Linda Wienant, and that is how I eventually ended up at Think Realty Magazine, was when Linda, who was the first editor, not the first editor-in-chief, but a longtime editor-in-chief, left.
Gotcha. Well, it's always funny stories how we meet Eddie Wilson, because we have a funny story too, but it's we won't go into that. So how important, from one interviewer to another, what's that?
I said, no, tell me.
We don't have time for that right now. We'll make it its own episode later on. So from one interviewer to another, how important is it to actually ask the right questions when you're doing an interview for somebody that might be like a gold mine of information when it comes down to it? Because you're ultimately finding content that is going to be published on your guys' platform that people are actually going to consume and pay for at some points, So how important is it to actually ask the right questions? And then how do you get to those right questions when it comes down to it? Because this isn't just, I feel like this, and I'll let you get to it in a second, but I feel like that those two questions combined isn't just for people that are doing podcasts or, doing content for real estate or whatever they're doing. I feel like it's important when you're actually just trying to learn in general, because that's ultimately what I feel like as an interviewer you're trying to do, is you're trying to learn from that person that's providing that content to you, because you're going to use it for something else. So kind of go into that a little bit, because I think it's important for our listeners to understand this when it comes down to it, especially when they're networking with people, when they're at these events, when they're at a Think Realty event and trying to learn from other people. How important is it to ask the right questions? And then how do you get around to like discovering the questions that you're actually going to ask the person?
Well, actually, two things. First of all, what you're doing and what I'm doing are similar, but definitely different. Because I have a huge luxury. I record everything. But if you and I do an interview for the magazine and I record everything, that's not to say that everything in that interview will end up in the magazine. Whereas with this, hopefully you'll make me look fabulous, but there's not a lot of
pieces.
So it is a little different because you're operating under time constraints that I'm not operating under.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think really having a very general core of questions. I actually only have 6 questions that I ever send to anybody in advance, and they're always the same. And I always say, please don't be offended. I did do my background research, but my goal is for you to tell your story, not for me to. And that's because they will tell you what they think is important, which is probably the most important thing in terms of being able to respectfully and effectively convey something about a person. Because once you know what they value, then you know how to ask them the questions that you need to ask to get to what you value, what you're trying to get. And it may not always be the same thing, but if you let somebody tell their own story and you're respectful about it, like I didn't not do any research into you, it's just that I want to know about you. I don't want to know what I think about you. That gives them a little bit of freedom to really say this is Yeah, so I think that the important thing is to let, be general so that people can answer what they want to answer, and then follow up with a respectful and either educated or researched follow-up question. Mm-hmm. So if you say, and normally I wouldn't do it this way because I would say, so how is Flipping Gary going? And then you tell me, then I'd ask you something. But say we already did that part, and then I'd say, so I thought the community master planning stuff was really interesting. How is that going? Assuming that's relevant. That's something I'm interested in. And that's also something that I think would be a really interesting thing to write about. But it lets you kind of show me what the big stuff is, that if I jump right into master planning and I don't let you talk first, I may never know that there's a huge revolutionary thing going on.
So it's more of a thing of like, you want to, like, you don't, let me see if I can structure this question right. You don't want to lead them into their answers. Is that right? You kind of ask the questions where you're allowing them to lead the conversation in a way, but you're asking the right questions because that's the way it works. So, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's super valuable to, like I said, not just people that are doing interviews for podcasts and videos or whatever else, but if you're out there and you do a lot of networking, I think that's extremely important because you don't want to set them up and lead them into an answer that they're ultimately not kind of truthful about, that kind of thing. So I think that's really important. So make sure you guys take that into consideration. So kind of switching tracks a little bit, tell us a little bit about the selfdirected.org website. And I know it's, that's kind of what I got out of it. I don't know. What is it? What's the full name of it? Self-directed.
We are SDI Society, which is Self-Directed Investor Society, and
Gotcha.
selfdirected.org is our home base. And anyone, whether you're actually a member, like a paying member or not, you can go there and get really comprehensive, easy to understand, highly actionable content about.
You guys have so much content. It's ridiculous. I did a little snooping around and it's like, there's a lot on there. So there's a lot of educational stuff on there. So tell us a little bit about what people can actually find on the website and kind of how you're involved with that.
Okay, so Brian and I co-founded that together. My husband, Brian Ellis, is the face of that, and he is the president. He does pretty much all of our education. I think my official title there is news editor because I do some market breakdowns, analysis, and things like that. But mainly what you would get there would be really comprehensive analysis of what kind of questions you need to ask yourself when you're setting up a self-directed IRA. Is there something better? Because especially if you're a real estate investor, honestly, there probably is.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people who do a lot of self-directed investing also are very interested in 1031 exchanges, which are, everybody nods their head. I'm going to nod my head too, but like it's very complicated. There's a lot to it, and most people understand just enough to be dangerous and not enough to actually necessarily save themselves any money.
Right.
So, and also a lot about prohibited transactions, which is another thing that when you have a self-directed IRA and you're using it for real estate, it is a wonderful tool. But again, if you know just enough to be dangerous, you could, it really isn't overstating it to say you could just blow up the whole account and you'd just be in the hole. It's horrifying, but it's also really simple to avoid if you have all the information.
Gotcha.
And it is on that website.
Right. And Kevin's going to have that link below for you guys. So make sure you check that out. There's going to be a lot of content on there. So, take it easy. Don't digest everything at once. Like, go for the best content there, but there's tons of stuff on there. I flipped through it a little bit and just absolutely like awesome content that you guys have. Not just a lot, but the quality and the quantity is fantastic. So yeah, we talk about a lot about IRAs on here because we have a mastermind member named Quincy Long with Quest IRA that's in there. We've actually had him on a couple of weeks ago for the podcast, and we talked a lot about IRAs. But you know, there's tons of stuff out there about IRAs, but you guys have to make sure you educate yourself the correct way, because what he says is that you got to do your due diligence when it comes to it. Because you talked about prohibited transactions, and he says a lot of people can get in trouble with prohibited transactions and ultimately like bite the dirt when they thought they were, you know, going to conquer the world with their investment, and then all of a sudden this happens. So make sure you guys go on there and check that out too. So kind of going back into with the interviews for that you have for investors. So I sent you a list of questions that I thought that would be super interesting because you have so much experience when it comes down to this. And one question that I actually had was, what is the number one thing that you have learned from interviewing any investors, even if it's not people that are in real estate or whatever, but in your experience, let's keep it strictly to Think Realty, because you've talked a lot of investors, and our audience are primarily going to be real estate investors. What's going to be the number one thing that comes to your head that you actually learned from somebody that like, oh, wow, that's something I never knew about, and I need to share this with the world, you know, that kind of thing. So what do you have?
I really think that the biggest thing is that you have so many options in real estate. And I don't mean like the usual, like, oh, there are a lot of strategies. I mean, it is infinite. Real estate investors are so creative, they're so innovative, and they're so flexible. I think it's largely because they come from such a varied background. You know, you have everybody from, you know, cardiovascular surgeons to people who didn't graduate high school. And, you know, there is so much flexibility. If you have a property and it is a straight out disaster, there is an actual answer out there for exiting that in a way that does not, you know, create a disaster for you. And watching people do that is just astounding, whether it's through creative financing. I love short sale investors, partly just because they have 10,000 different ways that they do the exact same thing, you know, creating different kinds of mortgage notes. I mean, it's just incredible. I have so much respect for real estate investors across the board. And they're also they have a very unique blend of, I guess, really pragmatic empathy. Like they really care, the good ones really care about the problem that they are solving, be it, you know, probate property or whatever the problem is. But they're also really pragmatic. You know, here are the 3 things that I can do for you that will also be good for me. And so they're really sustainable members of the real estate investing community and also their communities, because, you know, they're dealing with distressed homeowners, with burned down homes, with flooded homes, but they're not doing it in a way that like when they run out of money, it's over because they didn't make any money. Like there's a guy in Houston that will probably buy flooded homes, you know, as long as there's ever a flood anywhere, because he knows how to do it and make money. And then those people don't have to live in their flooded home anymore. You know, they can go live their lives and, you know, start to rebuild too. So there's just always options.
Okay. So you actually mentioned, you use the word, the good investors will tell you, you know, how much of an impact they're making on their communities and stuff like that. Now we are at Think Realty pretty much every event since for about a year and a half, 2 years almost. And one thing that we come across is a lot of people that are brand new into real estate. Either they haven't done a deal or they've done 1 or 2 deals. Maybe they have a rental property or they fix and flipped one property, whatever, and they're at Think Realty to learn how to do more of it. And something that is very, very common in real estate investors that haven't been in the business like a long time, and they're a one-man show, that kind of thing, is that they typically think that, you know, real estate's going to make me money. And that's their primary reason for being into real estate. You talked about how you talk to investors that are actually making impacts on their communities. We talk about the Community Go-Giver event a lot, and that's primarily what it's for, is to show that we're making an impact on our community and to teach you guys how to make an impact on your community. So would you say that like people that are getting into real estate for money is a pitfall?
No, I would not say that. I think when I say good, I mean it in 2 ways, but primarily I meant effective, long-term, people with sustainable real estate investing businesses. Under no circumstances do I think that getting into real estate because you need to make money is a pitfall. But I also think that a long-term, sustainable, and successful real estate investing business is exactly that, sustainable. How are you going to be sustainable? Certainly, you could be, you could be the Gordon Gekko of real estate and be very cutthroat. And, I'll admire your strategic mind if you do that. But if you are bolstering the community from which you are working, then you sort of inherently have an advantage. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, to say, oh, well, real estate investors who want to do this to make money are only to make money are bad or are going to have a harder time. Like, I don't think that's accurate.
Right.
At all. Okay. I just think you need to know why and how you're doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think probably, there's a certain degree of, a good sustainable business built on good sustainable ethical practices will last, and one that is built on unsustainable practices, it's just like a bad foundation. Like it's not going to last.
Yeah. Do you ever come across
money is the bad foundation?
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I guess that's more my question because that's a real common denominator when it comes to like newer investors, that they're in it specifically to make money. No, that's not always a bad thing, but like you said, if it's a foundation, it seems like that's kind of like what you want to stay away from. In your years of interviewing, when you come across these investors that have purposes, that have an actual like reason for being in real estate besides making money, do you seem like, does it feel like there's a huge difference between that type of person as opposed to somebody that's in it for the money? When you're talking to someone, maybe you see more passion or something like that, or you know what I'm asking here. So
yeah, I think so. I think that it's more a question of articulating what your passion is. Because I don't know if they're quite so big anymore, but when I first started writing home study courses, the vision board was a really big thing. And you were supposed to put your house and your car and your vacation and, all those like very tangible objects. Mm-hmm. And there's something to that. Like if I really want a car and I know that if I do 10 wholesale deals a month and that gets me off my behind and I start doing them, well, that's great. But really, why do I want the car? I probably want the car so I could, I don't know, take my wife and kids on vacation, or, I probably wanted the money so that I could quit my job and go to soccer games or things like that.
Yeah.
And you'll notice over the past decade that concept, the vision board is still there, but the vision has changed. And I think it's not so much that the actual vision has changed, but I think it's that it's being articulated more effectively.
Gotcha.
Sure, absolutely. There are people out there who just like to have, be Scrooge McDuck and sleep in a big pile of gold pieces. But yeah. For the most part, even Scrooge McDuck had nephews that he took care of because they were orphans. Yeah. Really, there's more behind it, but it's getting to the piece behind it that helps you really stay motivated and stay sustainable. And also, it is a nice and a good thing to do good for your community. And I do not think there are really very many people, especially not very many real estate investors, who don't ultimately want that, at least for their families, if not for their communities.
Right, absolutely. Now, kind of along those same lines, when like all these interviews that you have done, what's kind of been one of the common denominators? So we talked about something that you learned. What's something that you have learned that has been a pitfall? So I asked you specifically that if, a pitfall is someone that's in it for the money. And I think, that answer was fantastic. It was really good and very clarified because you have interacted with a lot more investors than the average person has. So what's in your interviewing sessions that you have with all these, investors, what has been one of the most common pitfalls that you have seen in investors? I'm not sure if they give you their stories, their background and that kind of stuff, but, so what do you think?
I think it actually kind of does go back to money a little bit. It's speed. There's a lot to be said for automating and for all, but even that, where you find people who make mistakes, and honestly, where you find people who fall into pitfalls or get categorized as bad or unethical. And bear in mind for the minute, I'm not making a statement about who is and isn't. And two,
right.
I think there are plenty of stories on both sides of the fence about that.
Right.
But people who are not inherently evil,
Yeah.
Let's remove them from the list. Speed is a real issue. You get under pressure, you get under time and a time crunch, and you make a mistake, whether it's because you do want to make that overnight money in a lot of cases, or whether you scale too fast, you get too big too quickly, you do really good on one scale, then you try to, do 20 houses instead of 5, and all of a sudden everything melts down, and, instead of 5 people being mad at you, 85 people are mad at you. There's so many options now with crowdfunding and different kinds of syndications, and all of these things are so good, but you also, if you are going to run one of those things, you have to be so careful. And if you're going to be involved in one of those things, you have to be so careful. Like, it is not a free ride. The only question is where your research and your work comes in. And honestly, I think that's what Think Realty and SDI are for. I mean, we provide the data and the information so that you can do the research.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. That's really good. So when you talk about speed, you're specifically talking about, so you use the example of scaling too quickly. So somebody that maybe their business exploded and they just weren't ready for that. Obviously you want to be prepared for that. What do you think is one of the best ways to actually proactively go out of your way to make sure that you don't scale too quickly? Let's stay on that, because that's something that we talk about a lot here. That topic's brought up a lot across this table. And so what do you think that's one of the best ways to actually proactively prohibit growing too fast? You talk about speed, but obviously they want to grow. They want to grow, but like, define how speed is included in there, and maybe what is the definition of too fast when growing?
Well, I think that on the smallest level, say I'm a flipper and I'm doing really great with one house, and somebody says, well, I'll give you $60,000 if you can, go buy another one and do it this month too. And I say, sure, maybe I pulled it off, but it starts to get a little questionable. And, but that goes okay. And so then all of a sudden I'm trying to do 4 or 5, and I don't have crews that I trust, and I don't have time to check them out. That's the most like on the ground type of thing that I would say.
Absolutely.
But I think there's a piece of you that has to be really honest with yourself. Like, how much can I, as me, myself, Carole, how much can I do before I start telling people I'll do stuff I can't do? And if you find yourself starting to do that, regardless of what it is you're telling people you'll do, like, slam on the brakes, like, be honest, say, I was wrong. I cannot do this. And here's $3,000 back, or whatever the question is.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And have other people like in your mastermind who are willing to say, I'm having some concerns.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe you should think about this, or can I help?
So it's a lot of self-awareness that you think should be kind of the answer to that, evaluating yourself, your time, and what you can actually handle. So, okay.
Well, it's not a failure. Like, it's not a failure to be honest about what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
It's a failure to lie about what you can do when you don't have time anymore.
That's good. I love that statement. That's fantastic. We're going to put that out on social media, so be ready for that. All right, so we're going to wrap it up with a few more questions here. I just got a little bit more time to actually have you on the interview. So if you guys are on Facebook Live right now, thank you so much for joining us. If you're coming by way of knowing Carole, but you don't know who we are, make sure you guys check out our podcast. We are on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So thank you guys for joining us on the Facebook live stream. So Carole, so we talk a lot about growth on this podcast, with growth with whether you're, in your spirit, your mind, your body, and, your spiritual life, all that kind of stuff, and growth with reading books, with, networking with people and that kind of thing, building your relationships. What has been one of the best, maybe if you want to list one very specific thing, or if you have a couple of resources, whether it's books, whether it's events that you've been to, or relationships that you have made, that has really helped your growth in the past few years when it comes to actually being the person that you are today?
Well, I think obviously thinkrealty.com is an excellent resource, and I think that it's a wonderful place to go and look for content and look for information, look for some fantastic market insights. And obviously, I think SDI.org is also, if you are a self-directed investor, then it is one of the best places to go.
You gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, good. We're going to have all that linked below for you guys, so make sure you check it out. So what has been, let's take this out of the actual like interviews. So all the interviews, we've talked about interviews and stuff like that. I really wanted to pick Carole's brain when it came down to that because she's interacted with so many people. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know until you hear it from somebody. So what has been, let's leave the clock back about 10 years. What is something that you know now that you wish you knew back 10 years ago? Maybe it was before you got into Think Realty or whatever. So what's that one thing?
Oh, I wish that I knew 10 years ago that, you know, there is an exit strategy for everything. Like, and I don't mean like there's a way to get out of it, but I mean, there's a way to have a viable, positive solution to absolutely anything. There's no industry in which that's more obvious than in real estate. And, but you have to not only look for solutions, but you have to be willing to let other people teach you deliberately or inadvertently and kind of help you find them. You know, there's no shame in looking at what you're doing and realizing that that holds an answer for me.
Gotcha. Do you have a specific scenario that you're thinking about that may have happened with that? If you're willing to share that.
No, that's fine. So let's see, it would have been 10 years ago because it was while I was still at so when I was at the Research Magazine, I was their interim editor. And I was quite convinced at you know, straight out of college that they needed to make me their editor-in-chief since the assistant editor and editor had left, which was indisputably, just those two women leaving was a wonderful opportunity for me because it let me step into a position that I would never have been able to convince anybody to give me otherwise, or pretty unlikely. Yeah. So I got to do that for about 9 months. And I did a very good job. And I thought that they should just fork it right on over to me and put me in charge of the whole thing. And that's pretty big. I mean, University of Georgia is a very big research institution. Yeah. And the head of my department elected not to do that. And I'd like to say I was just devastated, but I was also absolutely livid. Right. But it worked out wonderfully. I went to work with Brian. I got to write, if you have a home study course from back during the boom or the bust, like there's a decent chance I had something to do with it. Got to do a lot of coaching. Got to, write daily news for the investing letter. I was a medical reporter. It just, it turned out that it was one of the best things that could have ever happened for me. I got to work for myself. I got to work with my husband, and I got to be in a sector that I would probably have only touched if it hadn't been for not getting that job. But instead, I spent a whole lot of time really torn up with this guy for not giving me that job. Yeah. And, it would sure have been nice to spend it more productively, being a little bit more wondering about it than I was. So, I would just say that, there really is a solution. The sun will come up tomorrow, and there's a way around whatever it is. You just have to figure out what it is and then tell people. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think that so if that had not happened, if you did get the job, do you know if you would be where you are today because you seem like a very happy person. You're obviously very, very happy just being around you. For 10 seconds, you see that. Do you think that if you did get that job, if you did actually take that and that opportunity was presented to you, would you be where you are today? Honestly, I'm not setting you up for a yes or no question. No, it's easy, really. Everybody who's ever talked to me about it knows I love this job at Think Realty Magazine. Being editor-in-chief is precisely what I like doing and all the things that come with it. I would also have really enjoyed being editor-in-chief at the Research Magazine. And if they had done that, given that, I was raised in academia, it's a college publication, I would almost certainly still be there, and I'd probably be happy about it. But this is infinitely better, and I really never would have known. Yeah. Because, it's very unlikely I would have gotten involved in real estate. Gotcha. It's so crazy hearing stories, because almost everybody that we've had on these interviews, they've had some kind of scenario where, not exactly like that, but something has happened where they, it's very common with real estate investors. They were engineers, and that happens all the time when I'm talking to guys that we're interviewing, and they were engineers, and the crash happened, they lost their job, and it kind of pushed them into real estate somehow, some way.
they met somebody that's doing real estate and told them that they could do it too. And then all of a sudden they did it. And now they're like, yeah, that changed my life forever, that kind of thing. So I always love hearing that kind of a story, and how things like that can provide all kinds of other opportunities to you and open up doors that you kind of didn't see if that certain situation would not have happened. So it's amazing. I love that. All right. So last thing that we have here, and we're going to leave this with the audience, is that you got to leave one thing with the audience. Maybe it's a piece of advice, maybe it's a quote, maybe it's a thought that you have, an experience that you've been through. So one thing that you got to leave the audience for us, what would that be?
Oh, I already said this. I messed up.
You can do it again. It's okay. We can hear it again.
So look for solutions. Let people help you find them, because they are there. And just try to be a typical real estate investor. Be empathetic, but be pragmatic. Look for the solutions that work, and be willing to adjust your course.
Fantastic. And that is it for today's episode, guys. Carole, thank you so much for being on today. We appreciate you. We appreciate you taking time. We actually were supposed to do this a while back, and things happened, so we had to reschedule. But I appreciate you taking the time, being willing to work with us to be on the show today. So we'll definitely have you back, and then are you going to be in Irvine in July?
I will be in Irvine. You bet.
So I will see you there, and you guys too, if you guys are going to go. So Carole, thanks for being on, and we will have you back shortly.
Thanks so much.
All right. So make sure you guys, if you go to Think Realty in Irvine or Think Realty any other time, I think Atlanta is after that. If I'm not mistaken, make sure you guys go up and see Carole and say hey to her from Good Success from the podcast. So thank you guys so much for watching today. If you did join us on the Facebook Live interview, make sure you guys give this video a big thumbs up, leave comments below, and then share it around. Check out all the links below. Actually, Carole, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they be able to do that? What's the best way to do that?
Well, they probably can just, you can use my Think Realty email address. It's cellis@thinkrealty.com.
Okay. So you guys go there, and then we'll have links below for selfdirected.org. Is that the website, selfdirected.org, right?
Selfdirected.org.
Okay, gotcha. And then also for Think Realty, we'll have that link below. You guys see that everywhere anyway. So you guys make sure you check out the links below. And then if you are not already, make sure you are subscribed to the Good Success Podcast. We're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Leave us a review if you have not. And then make sure you check out the Community Go-Giver event we got coming up. Impacting your communities. We have an amazing speaking lineup. We've got Walter Walford coming, Quincy Long, Eddie Wilson, CEO of Think Realty, is going to be there as well. Jim Ingersoll, Gary Harper, Josh Belk, Ken Lacey, and there's a few others that are going to be there. It's a stacked lineup. We're super excited about it. So make sure you guys go sign up. Seats are going to sell out very soon. And then also the Good Success Mastermind, the next event is going to be August 9 through 11. So make sure you guys go apply for that if you have not already. And that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Carole, thanks again for being on, and we'll see you in July. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening in. And remember, whether you're looking to survive, thrive, or matter, our goal is to provide the tools to reach your vision. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.